It's so precious, and it doesn't depend on a certificate. It doesn't depend on what someone else can teach me outside of me. It solely depends on me and how deep and how much I decide to pour myself into that space, right? And so I think that is the blocker. Like, it stops you from being your true essence, and your true essence is a money printer. Like, your true essence, who you are in pure form without these limiting beliefs, is what will create money. It's what will generate everything that you're seeking. So I feel like for me, it's the representation of it time and time again just truly looks like a prison.
You're listening to the Feed Your Wild podcast, a conscious lifestyle show about all things nourishing for your body, mind, and soul. I'm Vanessa Rodriguez, and join me for candid conversations with changemakers, exploring health and wellness, food as medicine, intuition and spirituality, and nature-based practices that will transform your health and feed all parts of your wild self. Welcome back to Feed Your Wild podcast, familia. We have an incredible episode for you today. I'm just feeling really emotional actually right now after getting off of this call with Linda Garcia of In Luz We Trust and the Chosen 100 LLC. I am a bit tender this week. Some of you know, if you follow me on Instagram or if you're on my newsletter, my abuela Juanita, my grandmother, was in transition. Well, on Saturday night, March 18th, she crossed over to be with our ancestors. And it was bittersweet because she was suffering, and obviously her mental state, it was really challenging for her and for everybody. And I see this passing, this crossing over as a liberation, her death as a liberation of her mind, her body, and her soul. And she transitioned peacefully. So I just want to thank everybody who reached out and shared your prayers and your blessings and your well wishes, and those of you who maybe sent those out but also didn't reach out and tell me. I just want to thank everybody. I know that it really makes a difference. She is one of my role models, and I think that it's so synchronistic that I got to talk to Linda the week after her passing, because my abuela was definitely a role model for me in terms of her ambition, her fieriness. She was a Leo in like all the ways, big Leo energy. And she went against all the odds. She immigrated to Chicago in the 50s and from Puerto Rico with her family and my grandfather. And she ended up pursuing more education, got her master's, ended up being the breadwinner for her family when my grandfather was no longer able to work due to injury. And she took so much pride in her ability to provide and to enjoy life, enjoy the treasures of life available. Like, she provided home, space of home and receiving for so many, not just her family, but for the greater community, friends. And she was a caretaker in the truest sense of the word. And so she instilled in me this understanding that we have so much power in the creation of our life path, the co-creation of our life path, and building, reconnecting to our innate prosperity. Like, she was so connected to her self-worth, to her innate prosperity. And I really believe that that's what allowed her to establish a life where she could provide and live in a comfortable way. And I see Linda Garcia, our guest, as someone who does the same and who is out there expressing her gifts, her experience, and her beautiful energy that is really bringing us back home to ourselves in a deeply healing way when it comes to money. A little background on Linda. We had her on the podcast. I mentioned this in our conversation back in episode 112, honoring the medicine of hibernation and surrendering to changing tides, which, oh my, did we not even fully understand the level of change that all of us were going to experience after that episode was published at the end of 2019. Linda Garcia spent 17 years working in the TV and film industry, helping well-recognized TV networks, movie studios, streaming services build programming for the U.S. Hispanic market. And despite enjoying the work, Linda knew that there was more to life than working to make someone else rich. Eventually, she took the knowledge that she'd gained and used it to launch the Let There Be Luz podcast, a weekly podcast aimed to channel one's spiritual journey, which Linda concluded at its 101st episode. In 2019, after relocating to Dallas, Linda's spiritual journey led her to what she considers her life purpose: to help the Latinx community heal the generational money wounds that prevent them from achieving wealth. In 2020, at the height of the pandemic, Linda launched her first stock market course for beginners and created a rapidly growing community of Latinx investors on Patreon and Instagram known as In Luz We Trust. Today, Linda is a published children's book author, a self-made business owner, and a guiding luz for thousands of BIPOC who are looking to break free from limiting and toxic money mentalities. Linda's book, Wealth Warrior, is set to be released on April 11th, 2023. And today, we had the pleasure to sit back down with her and dive deep into all things money and money wounds. In this episode, we cover the journey that she took since the last time we spoke back at the end of 2019, bridging us from that last conversation to where she is today, and how she audaciously followed her intuition despite all the things telling her it didn't make sense, nobody was going to get it. How could she make this kind of leap and change from her spiritual-based work and podcast and community to focusing on money and the stock market specifically? She shares her story of coming into a healthier relationship with money, the many challenges and wounds that she had to really work through to get to this place, and how her work in wealth was seeded back when she was just 17 years young. We touch on so much in this episode. Linda walks us through the mindset of scarcity and her view on this really pervasive mindset and the importance of working through the mindset and the myths of scarcity, particularly for communities of color. She shares not only the major money wounds and blocks that she has had to overcome, but also the most common money wounds that she sees intuitives, healing artists, and helpers facing when it comes to their own healing work. She also shares the secret sauce to becoming a money printer, and also speaks to how even that concept can be activating and triggering. So she shares her higher perspective behind this concept and the reframes that are required for people to feel more comfortable and grounded in connection with money. Linda touches on the inherent abundance and prosperity found in her ancestry and how she connects back to that to remember her own innate prosperity and wealth. Speaking of wealth, she touches on what wealth means to her and why she decided to call her new book Wealth Warrior. Linda gives us an inside look at her own process, her journey with following her intuition and the importance of understanding that our thoughts are currency. Toward the end, we also do a special tarot card pull that I was called to do by our guides, and some deep, deep medicine through this card that I think really brings home this greater message that Linda shares in her work about connecting to your truth, to your worth, and to your heart, allowing space for that reflection, the processing of your wounds and grief, allowing us to make amends and transform our relationship with wealth, with money, with prosperity in ways that are fierce and courageous. And I would argue ways that Linda herself truly embody. I absolutely loved this conversation, and I would love to hear from you. How did this land? Did you feel activated, triggered? Did you feel lit up, excited? What are some of the money wounds that you have uncovered for yourself, or that you're working through, or that you feel that you have shifted? You can reach out to us on Instagram. I'm at Wildly Rooted. And you could also leave a rating, a review, and a comment if you're listening over on the Apple Podcasts app. I would love to hear over there as well. And of course, any rating and review helps us to share this message out with the wider world. Just as a quick reminder, if you have been interested looking at the Wildly Intuitive Practitioner Pathway, my 9-month mentorship and mastermind for practitioners and healers who are looking to incorporate an intuitive and spiritual approach, step out of that spiritual closet and align with your highest calling as an intuitive healing practitioner, the time is now, honestly, with the astrology, this new season, Aries season. By the way, Linda is also an Aries, which I found out after we ended the episode. I knew that she was an incredible fire sign, lighting up the path for so many. And so we have this incredible astrological support for stepping onto an aligned path, starting those new projects and programs, and ultimately stepping out as your full, authentic self. And if that looks like an intuitive healing practitioner sharing all of your gifts unapologetically and with joy, then I invite you to apply to the Wildly Intuitive Practitioner Pathway. We are closing the doors on this intake this time around on the 30th, March 30th. So submit your application before then, wildlyrooted.com/apply. Okay, with that, let's get into this juicy conversation with Linda Garcia. Hey, everybody. We have such an amazing episode today. I just feel it because I've been wanting to speak with Linda for so long. Today, we have Linda Garcia, CEO of The Chosen 100 LLC and founder of In Loose We Trust. Welcome back to the podcast, Linda.
Thank you so much for having me. It feels so good to be back here with you again. And I feel like it's a sacred, calm space. I feel like you're so grounding and just the energy you bring. So I'm delighted to be here today.
Oh, thank you. I feel the same. And I was just reflecting as I was preparing for today, reflecting on our previous conversation. And what's so wild for the listeners, this was episode 112, honoring the medicine of hibernation and surrendering to changing tides. And whoa, did we not really understand the change that was to come? Because that previous podcast episode was published December 30th of 2019. So it was just before 2020. Mm-hmm. And obviously, there has been so much change. And we were talking about surrendering to change because you were in a period of flux, of fluctuation, and going into a different season of your life and of your work. And that's where we talked about the medicine of hibernation. And I really encourage everybody to listen to that to get a really deeper understanding of this journey. And obviously, the world shifted and experienced so much with COVID. But you also had some major shifts in terms of your focus, your life path, and work. And I'm really excited to get into this. So I'd love for you to paint us a picture of this shift to really bridge us from this last conversation that we had back at the end of 2019 and where you are today. And I know that could take up the entire podcast.
No, it's actually incredible. I remember this conversation so vividly. And I remember telling you that I had a spiritual podcast and I felt like it was time for me to stop sharing my personal journey because podcast was almost like a diary of different medicines and different women that I would meet and just going into my own personal spiritual journey in all aspects of my life. And intuitively, I was just being called for silence surrounding that space, which was really confusing because it was like, well, then is there not a podcast? And the answer was, yeah, there's not a podcast moving forward. And that was really hard for me to just stop the podcast. It ended on episode 101, which I look at it as like a 101 into spirituality. And I had been seeking through the entire podcast, there's this through line of money and my own personal experience with money and being able to manifest so many incredible experiences around me, but the ability to manifest money or call in money or accumulate money was something that I had continuously been struggling with. And that became so much more apparent as I started offering services and experiences like retreats and having to charge for money. And so I began really intently studying abundance and what abundance meant. And for me, what I discovered is that I needed to sort of break away from my perspective of abundance and the word abundance overall, which is something that I tend to do in the sense that I like to sort of break up with what the system has taught me a word means. And then I like to discover it and perhaps invite it back into my life or never invite it back. And so I went through this with abundance and I needed to replace it with wealth and be very clear about what it is that I was seeking in terms of money and understanding money. And so I went on this journey to move into a space where I was solely going to focus on money. And it just so happened that the collective that I was connected to via the podcast was ready for this shift as well. So it feels like I went from one of the spectrum to another, but in reality, the way I started to see money was a direct reflection of our own self-worth. And so if you struggle with money, it's my personal belief that you're also struggling with your own personal self-worth. So I went on a discovery to do that in a very masculine way, a very logical way, which was very different from the type of healing that I had been nurturing, which was very feminine energy and more fluid.
I totally see that in the shift, but it's like, it's interesting because I think also because of the vessel that you are, everything that comes through, you're so transparent, you're so authentic. People really connect, like you emanate this ability to connect through the screen, through your voice. You know, I think that like the podcasts was so popular and really touched people. I still get people reaching out to me that are like, you know, either joining the program or become a listener. And they're like, oh, I came from Linda's podcast, you know, and like still today. So it's so beautiful how you created this community and then embodied that the shift in dynamic and like the energetics that wanted to come through you. And I just also want to highlight for people, even like back in our last conversation, we pointed this out, how I so appreciate the way that you radically follow your intuition. I mean, you literally can't see in front of you when you're taking these steps. You don't know what the F is going to happen. And you have, like you said, it seems like you went from one end of the spectrum to the other when it's a lot more nuanced than that, obviously. How did you do that? Because I know people listening right now, a lot of them are wanting to step, especially now, like the astrology is so primed for people to like step fully into their authentic path. Do you have some words of advice for people on how to do this in a graceful way as you did?
Yes, thank you. I have been trusting my intuition for a really long time. It doesn't mean that it's easy to trust my intuition or easy to take direction from my intuition, because a lot of the times it does feel like a fight. It kind of, the image that comes to mind is like I'm a little brat and I don't want to do what intuition tells me to do. That's kind of the way it always is in the beginning, until in a space of suffering, and my intuition is like, you're going to continue suffering. This is only going to get louder and much more challenging for you unless you take the path I'm asking you to take. And so that's the way it feels like internally. And I think because the steps are so bold and so loud, it may look like it's easy from the outside, but there is a lot of internal wrestling and dialogue that takes place. Like, for example, with transitioning from the spiritual podcast into a space of money, specifically the stock market, which might feel like shocking or like we're jolting out of one space and into another. I mean, it did feel like that for me internally, where I had to question many things intuitively before I fully embodied the space. I think that we don't give enough time to fight our intuition and ask those questions and honor what our intuition has to reply. So, to give you an example of that, for me, it was like, how am I going to go into a space from spirituality into talking about the stock market? Like, this just doesn't make sense to me. What are people going to say? And intuition just really started to sort of prime me and explain how money and the stock market specifically was much more spiritual than what I understood. It's a direct energetic reflection of our emotions. There is a chart that is literally measuring the way we feel about money on a second per second basis in the stock market while it's open. And we can see that. And then I started bringing up other questions like, well, doesn't that now mean that I'm going to become greedy? Because when I think of people in the stock market, specifically white older men in the stock market, what I think of is greed. And I would push against my intuition, and my intuition had so many answers for me. And one of them was really impactful. And that was that greed is something that is within all of us, that it's very similar to the feeling of jealousy. My intuition posed this question like, would you only feel jealousy if you're in a coupled relationship? And the answer is like, no, you can feel jealousy if you're a sibling, if you're a neighbor, if you're someone you follow on Instagram towards a stranger. And so my intuition really honed in on that and explained to me that just because someone doesn't necessarily have money, it doesn't mean they don't experience greed. And that if I took a closer look, that I would be able to detect greed in spaces of scarcity, most especially. And I was shocked by that response. And I started to really pay attention on scarce, and that there was this residual essence in the feeling of scarcity where it was a little bit of greed, where like not being able to let go of certain amount of money to make an investment, whether it's towards yourself or in a book or a course or joining a summit or whatever the case may be, you want to hold on to that and not let it go towards expansion. And so I started to really understand that greed was something that affects every single human being. It's natural, it's part of nature. And just really testing my intuition and asking these questions really made it easier for me to transition in this way. And it has always made it easier for me to transition. I think that the relationship with our intuition is just a relationship with our higher self. And the higher self has the capabilities to see far and wide. And so it's trusting that you can have these type of dialogues with your intuition to make your transition so much more smoother.
Did you have fears or like thoughts of what other people would think? I guess I want to get a little bit into the nitty-gritty of how you met those fears or those anticipations and moved your way through them, because I think that they cause a lot of other people to not do the thing that they're being called to do.
Yeah, sure. I most definitely felt that fear. I mean, it shook me to the core where like I could not sleep. I would shake, like I could feel my belly just shaking in fear. I don't know if you've ever felt that level of
Mm-hmm.
anxiety or fear where it's just like your belly starts to shake at the thought. And that's what would take place with me. And I dealt with that for, I would say, a couple of months. But what I was seeing outside, like what my intuitively and what my third eye was seeing was calling for me to stand up in this space. And so what eventually began to happen was that the fear of not sharing what I was being called to share, specifically surrounding money and the stock market, was greater than the fear of being judged. So eventually, it was the battle of two fears, the battle of being feared of not being accepted, not being loved in this space, being ridiculed, being humiliated, or the fear of not sharing what I felt for me very sacred information that was only being held by older white men that I had a unique perspective of that I can begin sharing. And so if we go back to this time frame, it was the beginning of 2020 when I started to understand that it was only a matter of time before the stock market was going to come down and that there would be a really big opportunity for people of color to start learning financial literacy and investing in the stock market. So it was like I was up against a clock, a tidal wave that I saw coming. The moment that COVID hit Italy, I knew that it was only a matter of time. So by February 5th, I was already making phone calls to family members, telling them to open a brokerage account because there would be a really big opportunity. And people asking me, "Are you okay? Have you slept? Is everything okay? Do you need to talk?" And it was just really apparent to me what I was seeing with my third eye in terms of this massive opportunity and this desire for us to learn more about economics and understand the system that we live in. And so that's kind of what pushed me. But yes, I absolutely felt the fear. And it was just the switch of the fear of not sharing became greater. And it was more of a responsibility that I needed to share with my community on how to step into masculine energy when it came to money. And then there was also this feeling of money has been in the hands of masculine energy for many, many years, and that it was now seeking to be in the hands of feminine energy.
Mm. Wow, I am really feeling that. And I want to touch, of course, deeper on these topics of scarcity and then some of these money wounds that we see very pervasively in our community, like in terms of practitioners, healing artists, helpers. But first, I want to just backtrack a little bit, do a little bit of historical digging. And people are probably like, stock market? Like, how did you make this leap, right? And I just want people to understand it was seeded long ago. Would you be able to share a little bit about like why the stock market and how did you connect in with this work?
Yeah, so I'm going to take it way back because I do feel like this is important. And I do mention this in my book. I was 17 years old. I had no money. I also had a daughter. I was a teen mom. I was really involved in school. I took like a leadership position within my school. I was senior class vice president and captain of the junior varsity cheerleaders and president of the drill team and all of these things. I was just trying to really make it. And I took high school serious when it came to extracurricular activities. I wasn't that bright when it came to like studious activities because I had just gone through so much and had moved schools so many times that grasping knowledge was really difficult for me. So I really worked on just like leadership skills and public speaking and making bold decisions. And one of my teachers had a trip to New York, an annual trip that was like a senior trip. And I had no money at the time. She fronted my trip as a secret. It was like our secret that I wasn't supposed to share with anyone. And all I had with me was $20. And we were going to be there, I want to say 6 days. And there were a couple of meals sprinkled in the trip that were paid for by the trip. So I knew that I could hold off to eat during those meals and I would be fine. So I go to New York, and there were 2 trips. We were getting split up into 2 groups. One group was going to go see Sally Jesse Raphael, the
Oh
filming.
my God, throwback.
Major throwback. I just dated myself. For those that don't know, she had a talk show. And then the other half was going to go into the stock market and ring the morning bell. And I was so upset that I did not get chosen to go to the Sally Jesse
Of course.
Raphael. You know, I was devastated, and I'm like, whatever. We're walking towards the building, and I just see this huge building that I remember felt important. Like there was just strong energy coming from the building. And I remember walking in and just feeling all the energy from the men in there, and the pink papers and the yelling and all the vibes. And I remember thinking, I don't know what happens here, but I know that what happens here is impacting the world, not even the United States. Whatever is taking place here is impacting the world. And I also remember a second thought, and that thought was, where are the women? Why is it only men? And so fast forward to 2012, I start working for a tech company, Netflix. And at Netflix, when you're in tech, there's one thing that there's abundance of, and that is money. Money is looked at from a completely different perspective, the way you raise money. I mean, it's just like, it is really crazy to work in a tech company and watch the tech company have so much power with the people that are coming up with this technology, very little money, but are able to tap some of the richest people in the world to get money. I need money to do this. I need money to do that. And the money just flows so easily. There's no fear. What if I can't get the money? What if I can't raise the money? No, there's so much confidence in what they're doing. The money just like flows in, and it's incredible to see. I mean, Netflix wasn't profitable until 2021. So it has been raising money this entire time. And that, I feel like, by osmosis really shifted something within me. And I had a colleague that began educating me on the stock market and really asking for me to start investing and giving me all these reasons why. And I remember being so intimidated by him and the conversations he wanted to have with me. I did not feel adequate. I came from the hood. Like, I was in gangs. I was a teen mom. And I really already felt like a fraud working at Netflix. And then adding the layer of him wanting to have stock market conversations with me, and stock conversations felt like beyond me. At the same time, I had just made 6 figures for the first time in my life, and I had been praying to spirit and just praying for knowledge on how to take care of this money that I was getting, because I went from making $13 an hour to making 6 figures. And so I really wanted to be intelligent with my money. And so as I was praying, like, this person was also coming into my space and educating me. And finally, I started to listen, and I began investing. I took $200 a month and began to purchase Netflix stock. I did that over the course of a year. I watched my money grow so fast and in a way that was unbelievable to me, that I had never experienced. Like, what? You don't have to work for money. You don't have to take your time and exchange it or do physical labor. It was mind-blowing to me. And so the second year, I doubled down and I invested $400 a month. And then 6 months after that, I continued. After the year of $400 a month, I continued with $400. I got laid off. So I invested around $8,000 to $9,000 total over the course of 2.5 years. And those $9,000 turned into $500,000.
Wow.
Exactly. And by the time the pandemic was close to us, I felt like I had, at the time, 8 years of knowledge of never really sharing to anyone about my investments or how to make money in that space. And I felt like a gatekeeper. Aside from that, I was very disciplined when it came to my investments. I never took my money out. And at the same time, I was falling flat on my face with trying to generate money in other ways, like by pricing my services or by pricing retreats that I was holding at the time. So that's how that came into play. By that time, I was really knowledgeable on the market. I started to understand that I knew it a lot more than what I had I thought I needed a degree or something. Like I thought I needed to be educated in that space. And I started to realize when I found myself actually coming out and talking about it, how much I actually knew. And then I realized that during the pandemic, I think that there's so many of us, especially as healers, we wanted to help, we wanted to do something. And for me, this was a very clear contribution that I could give to my community with education and with it being rooted in money wounds and in money scarcity. So all of my programs and everything I teach, we first have to tackle our relationship with money, the level of toxicity, and heal that first before we can actually start investing.
Hey, I'm interrupting this episode to bring you a special invitation. If you are a healer, helper, or a stuck empath that feels like they're really called to be in service, but just not sure how to move forward on that path, I have a special private and free training on how to create a transformative intuitive healing practice you love. In it, I include literally the culmination of everything that I have learned through my experience over the past decade as an intuitive healer and bridging the science and spirituality of healing work and creating a practice that not only supports your community, your clients and patients, but also brings together all of your gifts into a beautiful vehicle for your soul mission. This private training is available for those who apply to my Wildly Intuitive Practitioner Pathway. This is my 6-month group mentorship and practitioner mastermind for healers and helpers who are ready to step out of the spiritual closet, expand their intuitive gifts, and go from struggling empath or conventional practitioner to what I call New Earth Intuitive Healer. In the Wildly Intuitive Practitioner Pathway, aka WIP, together we initiate into the Akashic Records for intuitive connection, experiencing deep self-healing and unparalleled support for your clients and patients, and not to mention you. We discover your intuitive gifts and break through blocks, limiting beliefs, fears, and programmings that are holding you back. And you get to channel an integrative body of work that synthesizes your innate gifts, experience, and wisdom, and ultimately design a unique and valuable and effective holistic intuitive healing practice that's transformative and divinely led. This is an accelerated path held by a group with other heart-centered practitioners, healers, and change makers, getting some deep intuitive coaching, foundational intuitive healing training, personal growth curriculum, and practitioner practicum circles, as well as hands-on support from our team. If you're feeling ready to say yes to your calling as the intuitive healing practitioner you are meant to be, I invite you to apply today and get your instant access to the advanced VIP training, How to Create a Transformative Intuitive Healing Practice You Love. You can go to wildlyrooted.com/apply or click the link in the show notes, and I'll see you on the other side. Now, back to our episode. One thing that I just want to put a pin in that you so eloquently demonstrated, like through your actions and your faith and trust in yourself and in the process, is that I guess what we could look at what success might look like how do you get there? A lot of people think it's gaining knowledge, like more knowledge, more education, more knowledge, more education. I see this within the healing space and practitioner work. People dropping money for all these different certifications. They keep getting like the trainings because they feel like they have to be a quote expert before going out there, or they need to know in a particular way, like an educated academic way, what it is that they're going to teach. But what I have found, and what I've also, like through my mentors, have really drilled into me, because I also dealt with this, right? I also experienced this in my life. It's really about your personal mastery and your personal experience of this work and it coming and going through your channel, your unique channel, and teaching it from that place of what we could call mastery because it's based off your personal experience. And that's exactly what I think so many of us can feel from you, Linda. That authenticity piece that I was talking about before is that it's not just a regurgitation of something that you've read from a book or that you've learned from a program. It's your lived experience, and you share the numbers. You're so transparent with that. And I think that makes all the difference. And it's such a huge service that you're providing to the community by not only obviously providing this valuable information and process and way and tools and ways to break through like that intergenerational money wound and trauma, but also just by like living it and being the light in that way. You know what? I love that in Loose Sweet Trust, right? Well, with having said that, I want to get into the money wounds, the blocks. And here I'd like to, since you have experience as an intuitive, as a healer, and now moving into this like teaching space, what have you found to be some of the more like major blocks when it comes to money on a collective level in that population?
Yeah. So, what I find really interesting through this process of this journey and trying to heal myself from my own personal scarcity and my own personal money wounds is that it's not this experience of like, oh, I'm healed. And it's like everything else, right? It's a process and you reach a new level and you find a new devil. And so I think that that's what makes the journey really interesting. And I have let go of resistance towards having this idea that like, because I'm in this space, I need to have it all figured out and it needs to be perfect so I can demonstrate what perfect looks like, which is such BS. And so I just want to make it clear that through this journey, there will be new experiences that will bring up the scarcity mindset, that will bring up the money wounds. I think it's important for us to understand that, at least for me, in really honing in and letting go of money scarcity, the idea of it started in 2019. And so in 2019, I was 39 years old. So I've been 39 years old, really practicing money wounds and practicing scarcity a lot longer than I've been practicing abundance. So I think for me, it was first getting really clear on my own relationship. And I think what would vibrate in the community very common was money is the root of all evil. And I have to work really hard for money.
Mm-hmm.
Those two beliefs, I feel like, are the strongest beliefs in the community. So I feel like really understanding and questioning those beliefs to yourself, with your higher self, working through them, identifying them every single time they come up for you, it's going to be a crucial part of the process. And then they just kind of morph and they trick you and they turn into something different as you're navigating through the journey. But I would say that those are the two biggest blocks in our community.
Mm-hmm. How do you see those playing out? Like, how did you see those playing out in your own life and within your community if examples were shared by people and listeners?
Yeah, I think that what is really evident, the belief that money is the root of all evil or that wealthy people are greedy, which I feel are kind of the same, kind of rooted in the same fear and the same belief. The unfortunate part about that is that that belief is what keeps the entire collective not amassing wealth, not being able to be free in what it is that they want to do, not being able to trust that by being themselves, by following their intuition, by doing exactly what they want to do, that money will be represented. So I think the way I see it manifested the most is just a complete block. It's a complete wall. It's almost like a cage. It's like a prison that is really hard for folks to get, not impossible, of course, not impossible, but really hard for folks to move through. I think that like it really has the power to stop us from diving into our greatest gifts and what we're here to give. We talked about a little bit about like me pursuing this space, what I'm here to give, what I'm here to do. It's so precious and it doesn't depend on a certificate. It doesn't depend on what someone else can teach me outside of me. It solely depends on me and how deep and how much I decide to pour myself into that space, right? And so I think that is the blocker. Like, it stops you from being your true essence. And your true essence is a money printer. Like, your true essence, who you are in pure form without these limiting beliefs, is what will create money. It's what will generate everything that you're seeking. So I feel like for me, it's the representation of it time and time again just truly looks like a prison. So the image that I always get when I'm teaching these courses is like, we're going cell to cell, unlocking doors, like teaching the person, here's how you pick the lock. And then we free one woman, and then I have a partner, and like, you go that way, I'll go this way. And then we're just, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's a collective effort that we're moving through in the process.
I love that. I love that you're bringing it back to the collective, and that it's like we're doing this together and we're uplifting one another. And that really is the way through these blocks. I'm going to have to use that as a soundbite for this podcast. When you said you yourself, your essential self is a money printer, where I was just like, whoa, that really hit. I understood what you meant. But what I also felt, because I'm tapped into this field, the collective of the listenership of the podcast, and what I started to get from people is like, oh my God, how could you even say that, right? Like that there's something dirty almost about it, or like there's a shame. And I see this happening with so many practitioners and healers and people who are in the medicine arts, where or medicine work, where it's like shame and guilt for receiving money for that work. And obviously, as healers, we're all super heart-centered and we want to do all the things for free. We just want to help and give. How do we begin? Like, what is, I know I'm not going to ask because it's going to take a while. I'm sure you have so much in your book about this, but like, so we may not have time to talk about that, like put the key in the lock and unlock it. Like, how do you actually do that? But what are some of the first steps, or what are some ways that you would have someone approach that if they have that feeling after, like getting activated or triggered by what you just said?
Yeah, that's so crazy, because when you said like that could be so triggering, you should have seen my face. Like, my eyes like popped out of my head almost, and thinking, oh my gosh, that's right. I used to be like that. That was the thought that I used to have. Like, the thought of me putting wealth as one of my top values, which is so natural to me now. But 2019, Linda, would have been so disgusted by even what I just said, right? And I think a lot of what I had to really come to terms with is the importance of money and how valuable money is in our communities. We need organic, fresh foods. And if we don't have access to land to grow those organic, fresh foods, or we don't have the time because we're exchanging our own personal time for money, then we need the money. We also need to be in spaces where we have shelter that is safe and feels good, and an environment that feels good. And all of that requires money. I think that we're missing the component of how much good money can do in the hands of good people. And what we have seen reflected is, from a lot of our perspective, is because it's also the way we're projecting and what we're looking at and what we're searching for. So therefore, it's being reflected, is money in the hands of bad people. But when you start to change your relationship, you will actually start to find people that are really good and that have a lot of money and that are distributing it in ways that are necessary in our communities. So for me, for example, I would much rather be in a healthy relationship with money, not being emotionally attached to money in a toxic way, and understanding that money is simply a tool. It is nothing more than a tool, just like a tool that you would use in your garden to plant a seed. It is the same exact thing. Money has the power to multiply itself. You will never get rich off of exchanging your time for money. You will never get wealthy off of exchanging your time for money. And we need you as healers, as good people, to become wealthy. We need you to become wealthy because we need you to distribute money in appropriate ways to the people that you employ, to the people that you bring on. We need you to distribute that. We need you to distribute it in your communities. There's so much good that can be done with money. And in the system that we work in, money can move so much faster than our own intentions or working on one-on-one with someone. We can literally pull people out of their current environments with money. So I would like to offer that to really reflect on how much maybe your ego is tied to the work that you're doing and won't let you see the good that money can do and how much further money can go without needing you as a human. Like I can send out money to work, I can send out money to create good for other people, and it won't require my time or energy to do so. And that's okay. That's how we help more people faster.
Oh, that's such a important picture that you just painted for us. I think that we could get so mired and caught up in these thoughts and beliefs, which can be very somatic, right? Like these are deep wounds that are also, as you have spoken of previously, and like in your work, they're generational, intergenerational, ancestral, deep wounds that we have to work with. So we will feel them viscerally. Like the response that you were talking about, like the fear of your belly, like a lot of people will have that when it comes to money, right? So I just love when we can remember that there is this like larger invitation to give in the most natural way that we can, but with this flow, like this reciprocity of the money coming in and money coming out. And that, like, I think that definitely will help people to start to, because I think obviously everybody has their own journey with their money wounds they have to go through. I'm sure there's a lot of also childhood stuff, right, that like is tied to all of it. But I think that is just a beautiful like seed for us to plant and allow to grow and to start to nourish those parts of us that are really hungry to do more. But we feel like receiving more money is not the way to do that. I think that really challenging some of those beliefs.
You know, what always comes to mind is like, I think of my ancestors and I don't think of like my grandparents, or I go all the way back and I think of like Aztecs. And I'm also part Spaniard, so I can't discount my Spaniard ancestors either. I'll go all the way back. I think about how both lineages were so abundant. Like if I focus in on my native from Mexico, those ancestors, they were rich. They were some of the original merchants. They were the stock market before the stock market. Just because they were making exchanges with seashells at one point, it didn't mean that evolving into money made it any different. There were still original merchants. And I always see their life so lavish and so abundant with fruits and vegetables and jewelry and just the spaces that they lived in and their crowns and their thrones. I just see everything as so abundant in that way. And I think one of the things that we have to understand, and then maybe perhaps this is why we also feel some disdain towards money itself, but we're also evolving out of the way we know money becoming currency. In 2008, someone invented Bitcoin in the middle of a recession because this is what happens during tough times in the economy is new ways of thinking, new possibilities emerge, and Bitcoin was one of them. And so we're seeing the way money is evolving already in this space. And one thing that I really want to drive home is that earlier when I said like you yourself at your pure essence, you're a money printer, what I'm trying to convey is that your thoughts are currency. It won't be long before we probably, maybe our children or our grandchildren don't see a dollar, they don't see coins, they don't see paper money. But we're moving into the space now where this day and age with the internet, our thoughts are our currency. And to me, what I find so powerful in the space, being a Latina, being a child of immigrants, I was really able to let go of this separation that I had between I'll never be this white man in Silicon Valley. I let that go with the single idea that that white man in Silicon Valley, all he had was a thought. He had a thought that he then transformed into something that was tangible. I can have thoughts too. I have the ability to think. I have the ability to receive downloads just like you, just like everyone else. And there's no block and there's no wall and there's no cage and there's no chains that will ever come between me and the thought. forever be able to receive thoughts and then turn those thoughts into currency. And what I've identified is that those thoughts are what a collective is needing from me specifically, that only I can produce and only I can create. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with being compensated in that way. For me, I love to compensate other women doing the same type of work where I'm in need of something and they have the thought, they produce and manifest the service, and then I'm able to then pay for it. Like, it is just such a perfect experience in the way I look at it. And so I'd like to offer that we've been merchants for generations and generations.
That's such a huge reminder. And, when you're speaking, going way back too, I just think about even the innate prosperity found in nature, the innate abundance found in nature and in indigenous lifeways. And like you said, as while they didn't have money in the way that we know or understand money today, there was definitely exchange and reciprocity. And I think if we were to go way back, those indigenous lifeways there is that equal and fair exchange. And I think what we see today is obviously not, right? It's like the 1% or whatever that has so much control and power and money. And I think that these times, especially as we move further into this age of Aquarius, we had Pluto going into Aquarius, giving us a little preview of big shifts happening on the collective level. With technology, as you said, so much that's going to rapidly change. And sometimes the fastest times, as you mentioned, where this happens is when there's a lot of constriction, contraction, potential recession, which obviously there's a lot of fears of us coming into a recession, or that we are already, but there's denial about it,
Yes.
Honestly, I feel like we could do a whole other episode just on the state of the economic world right now, and money and cryptocurrency and the SVB bank kind of folding, and just there's so much to talk about that because I'm starting to geek out on that stuff too. But I want to we'll bring it in. Keep the focus. I want to bring it back to your book because I know that you have a lot in there, all the things that we're talking about, you're touching on at a certain level. And of course, you're teaching on the stock market as well. But the title of your book, Wealth Warrior, I was curious because you're talking about abundance. What does wealth mean to you, and why Wealth Warrior as the title of your book?
Yeah, well, wealth for me, as I mentioned before, I had to let go of the word abundance to really understand what wealth is for me. And it's basically just the understanding that money has the capability of multiplying itself with me just taking one simple action, and that's to invest. And then money can multiply itself. It doesn't necessarily need me for time or exchange. And warrior is the energy that I've had to bring with me as I'm making this transition, making this shift in my mind, and understanding that I'm conquering, I'm taking back what was once taken away. I'm coming back for it. I haven't given up. I'm shifting my mind. I'm understanding the way it works. And so I'm here to retrieve it and obtain it and multiply it for myself and my community.
When you had the thought to write this book, did you have the full idea of what it would be? What was this process like in writing this book? And I'd love for you to share a little bit about what people can expect. And it's coming out, FYI, April 11th, right? 2023.
Yes. So what's really wild is that I've always wanted to write a book. I never ever thought that my book would be based on the stock market. So I did my first course that I executed. I thought it would be a workshop. It turned into a crash course. I thought I would just offer it one time. It turned into offering it twice a month for almost 3 years. And in the process of launching my course, there was a literary agent who's one of the biggest literary agents in the United States that represents the Latinx community. And she came in hand with a publisher. It's an imprint under Hachette, which is one of the top 5 publishers, book publishers. They took my course without telling me who they were, which, I mean, a lot of people take my course. I don't know who's taking the courses. And so they took it twice. And then they came with the question, have you ever thought of writing a book? We think this is a book. So I was embodying my true self. I was honoring my intuition to take this path I always knew since I was very young that I would one day write a book. I didn't know it would show up in this way. I was just honoring myself. And so the book was really already written. It was already there. And so it was just taking and putting it into writing and adding, pouring more into it, more intimate details about my life into the book. So I wanted to offer that as well as just another testament of how when you really embody your path and your true essence, how things just manifest. And we got this really amazing book offer that I think that's where I got this in my head where like, wow, I really can print money by just being true to who I am. I didn't need a degree. I didn't need to be on Wall Street. I didn't need all of these things. I just needed my personal truth. And so the book itself, we broke down the course and just poured, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of stories of my own money wounds. So you go through a very personal story while simultaneously understanding the stock market and the basis for the stock market.
I love it. I love it because you are going deep into this. Well, it's really not just mindset work, it's soul level work with these wounds and something so practical and mundane of this earthly world, like the stock market, right? So practical. And you can literally apply what you're learning right away as you're moving through and developing your new relationship with money. I think it's brilliant. You literally just wrote this book, but do you have other like courses and books in mind? Is there anything else like stirring in the back oven or?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that a book without the stock market, maybe just solely dedicated on money wounds, is definitely something that I would like to get into. And just my personal perspective on how I see money in general is definitely ideas that are brewing for sure.
Well, it's interesting because when I was preparing for this episode, my guides told me to pull tarot card. And that hasn't happened in a really long time, when I have a guest episode. So I was like, of course it's happening with Linda, like it's probably like your guides like telling me to do it. So I'm like, okay, I pulled. I would say this card is probably traditionally seen as one of the toughest or most contractive cards of the deck, which is very interesting. It's the Three of Swords. Are you familiar with tarot and some of the meanings?
I have a tarot deck and I like to just practice with it here and there and look up the meaning, but so not as well versed as you. So I'd love to hear your take.
So traditionally, this can be seen, which I don't resonate with us, and I haven't seen this to be true in a lot of the different readings, but like either heartbreak or betrayal and things like that. But the way that I have come to understand it, if we were to use this like so-called betrayal, is really more so like betrayal of your own heart. And that this card is actually an invitation to take the radical step of coming back home to yourself and to the heart before we start to worry about other things, like how other people are going to react, or go into those thought patterns of like, I'm terrible, I'm so bad. Because the swords and with this card have a lot to do with judgment and like fear of what others are going to think, or like being in conflict with self or other. I found it so interesting that this card is coming up around this topic of money, right? And like the money wounds. So the way that I'm really feeling this is like we have these wounds, but we have everything we need to heal it. And we need to drop back into the heart and do this exploration process as you are inviting us to do. What and who put that sword there in the first place? Because of systemic oppression? Like, is it internalized hate? I think people can be a little bit fearful of doing that deep work, but truly, I think this is part of the pathway that you are lighting up for people to come back home to ourselves in a deep way. And hey, here is also like a really practical way that we could break through these generational and collective wounds and patterns to truly uplift one another. So I just love that this card came in, and I'm wondering how it lands for you.
Oh my gosh. So I'm looking at it now. I pulled it out now. And I think what I find really interesting is that this card was exactly where I was when we spoke the last time we spoke.
Gosh. Yeah.
Yes. And so for me, what came up is like, look at all the beauty that came from moving through that, experience. So I agree 1000% that this is an invitation So yeah, I'm looking at the card and I can see our last conversation and how painful it was for me being a brat and like telling my intuition, no way, I'm not going to do this. And then going through it and having all of these incredible experiences that are taking place right now. And I'm sure that this card will show up again when it's time for me to transition into something else. And I'm here to receive it and I'm ready for it.
Oh, so full circle.
Yes.
Just like, I love it. It's so perfect. Linda, I have to ask, of course, I know last time you answered this, but we were in a very different space and place. What is currently feeding your wild coming off of this conversation?
Wow. I knew that you were going to ground me. I knew it. You were going to ground me and you were going to bring this energy of calm. I think right now there's all of these incredible things taking place where we landed an invitation from Barnes and Noble and I'm going to do a book signing, which is all of these things that put me in a very not grounded space. There's so much positive and so much good, but I feel like you brought me back home. You've centered me. You have reminded me of being the seed and just being warm under the dirt, and that there's still so much more of me to grow. And yeah, so I feel like you really grounded me with this conversation, and I really appreciate that.
Oh, well, I feel like you have provided, and it goes with this season that we're in Aries medicine. I don't know what your sign is, but I feel so much fire from you,
Aries.
Linda. You're Aries?
Aries, yeah.
Of course you are. Oh my gosh, bless the Aries. God bless the Aries, because honestly, it's your fierceness, it's the courage, it's that fire, hearts on fire that really launch us, allows us first to come home to ourselves, and then launches us into our highest path and into alignment. And so thank you, Linda, for coming back on the podcast, sharing your gifts, sharing your energy, your Aries medicine. I love it. And for all that you're doing. So I know everybody's going to want to get your book. What is the best way that they can do that and connect with your work?
Yes, thank you so much. So the book is now available for pre-order, which is really, really important, especially being a woman in this space. For us to pre-order, I would greatly appreciate it if you feel called to do so. You can pre-order it at target.com, barnesandnoble.com, walmart.com, amazon.com, and it is Wealth Warrior: 8 Steps for Communities of Color to Conquer the Stock Market. And yeah, I also have a challenge coming up. It's an 8-day Wealth Warrior challenge that will start the week after the book is officially released, where we are going to go through 8 days of moving through the book with tasks at hand. It's a challenge. And the price of entry is the purchase of 3 books, 1 for yourself and 2 to give away, in the act of giving and receiving as well. So I would love for you all to join us through this. You can follow me at Lose Warrior, or you can follow my business account at In Lose We Trust, and you'll find the information in our link in our bio.
Amazing. I didn't know about that challenge, so I'm very excited to join and participate. And yeah, money and wealth and prosperity has been so alive in the communities and the spaces in my program, Wildly Intuitive Practitioner Pathway. So I think the timing of it is just so kismet. Linda, thank you for an amazing conversation, of course, and for all that you do. So many blessings to you.
Thank you, Vanessa. Likewise, thank you so much for having me.